When I first saw screens for Rabi-Ribi, I assumed this was not going to be a game for me. The cute and colourful graphics made me think this was some kids game. It surprised me then how deep and interesting the game turned out to be. I enjoy Metroidvanias, and Rabi-Ribi is an excellent addition to the genre. You play as Irina, a rabbit that wakes up one day to discover she's been turned into a human-bunny hybrid. The people of her world have become enchanted and obsessed with bunnies, so that when anyone sees her, they try to kill her. She finds her master, who tells her that they need to power up a mystic stone to allow them to find Irina's master's sister and uncover the mystery about her transformation and the spell that is affecting the people of her world. In order to power up the stone, she needs to locate magic users. So she goes on a quest with her fairy friend Ribbon to find magic users throughout the world. The basic premise of the story is fine. I was interested in finding out what had happened to the world and how Irina had transformed from a bunny to a half-human. I also enjoyed the journey to recruit new magic users. However, the story became too convoluted over the course of the game, with unnecessary twists being thrown in that made it a bit too silly. You meet a lot of characters, the magic users, along the way. There were almost too many characters because they weren't well fleshed out. There was some self-referential humour at least, which made me chuckle occasionally. The game knows the story is silly, and so having the characters comment on some of the random events made it easier to digest. Like when moving from one area to another, one of the characters questioned how they had gone from the beach to a snowy mountain. I liked that the game at least acknowledged that it was silly. The dialogue between characters was awkward at times. I'm not sure if this was intentional or bad translation, but some statements didn't make much sense. The story and the characters were the weakest part of the game, which was a shame because it did start off interesting. Rabi-Ribi is a Metroidvania. It's a 2D action platformer where you unlock new abilities that open up new areas on a world map. You start the game very weak with just a hammer for melee attacks, and movement felt pretty stiff. As you discover new abilities and unlock upgrades, Irina becomes a powerful fighter. You can unlock double jumps, air attacks, a variety of projectiles, sliding attacks, bombs, and many more abilities. When I first started playing, I didn't enjoy the stiffness of the movement and attacks. When you use your hammer, there's a cooldown before you can perform another combo. I found this very awkward because I just wanted to hit enemies, and having to pause from fighting every few seconds felt jarring. The game became so much more fun as I discovered the new abilities and upgraded my hammer to perform longer and longer combos. The pause to recharge was still there, but it was less of a problem as you played the game. The new abilities were necessary not just for unlocking new areas, but also to handle the difficulty of the game. I found the first 3 chapters of the game to be very easy. I only died once in the first 3 chapters. The difficulty significantly ramped up from chapter 4 onwards. I was dying quite frequently on boss battles, and when I did win, I normally scraped through with a sliver of health. I hadn't spent any time grinding up to that point, but from chapter 4 onwards I took time out to grind and buy upgrades. The hub town has a shop where you can buy upgrades to abilities, or you can upgrade your stats like health, attack, etc. I quite like that you can choose the upgrade to buy so you can focus on the stats and abilities that suit your playstyle. The design of the world map is impressive. The areas connect together in a smart way, and there are so many secret routes to unlock when you acquire new abilities. The world map is completely open to you. You're given objectives to find magic users, and you'll have the locations of a couple of them highlighted on your map at any time. But you don't need to just focus on the areas highlighted in the objectives. You can go to any area and explore it, provided you have the right abilities to unlock the route, and you're strong enough to handle the increased difficulty. Similar to other 2D action platformers, you attack enemies with your hammer for melee attacks, or you can use your fairy companion Ribbon to attack with projectiles. The publisher P-Cube has called the game a bouncy bullet hell platformer, and the bullet hell aspect comes from the boss fights. Bosses attack you with a variety of lasers, bullets, and missiles flying all over the screen. I found it pretty much impossible to avoid all bullets and took damage often. Boss fights were very much about minimizing damage and knowing when to let yourself get hit so that you have a few seconds of invulnerability to avoid a bigger attack. The boss fights were challenging, but also a lot of fun. My only criticism of the boss fights was that they all felt really similar. Bullets and lasers were flying everywhere for all the boss fights, so it was hard to differentiate them in my mind. There were a few that were genuinely different, like fighting underwater or an arena where platforms disappear and drop you onto spikes. These were more memorable because of the environment that the fight took place in rather than the boss itself. There were also a lot of boss fights and mid-boss fights. It seemed like every 20 to 30 minutes I was encountering another boss. I've always been a fan of big end-level fights to test your skills up to that point, but having so many made them feel less special. Fortunately, the battle system was really good, so even if they weren't special, they were still fun. Playing on Vita, I did find some stuttering in the gameplay. This didn't happen during boss fights surprisingly, despite there being dozens of projectiles on screen at a time. It happened more when walking through the levels. It was annoying but didn't ruin the game for me, and didn't result in me taking unnecessary damage. I really liked the bright pixel art graphics. They were detailed, and the main characters and bosses had their own unique designs. There were also a lot of different enemy types too. The most common were the girls obsessed with bunnies that kept trying to attack you, but each area had their own distinct enemies to discover that suited their stage, like giant mushrooms in the forest area or killer fish in the underwater area. Cutscenes had hand-drawn characters, and these had the girls in risque clothing. Rabi-Ribi is a really good game, so it seemed unnecessary to add girls in skimpy clothing. I felt the same way about Criminal Girls 2. It's a good game, so why bother with limiting its appeal by making it smutty? Rabi-Ribi was no way on the level of Criminal Girls 2, but it just felt unnecessary when you've got a solid game already. The music was surprisingly good. Each area's music suited it well, and I liked the upbeat tunes that suited Arena's personality. I wouldn't necessarily buy the album, but the songs were decent and complemented the overall game. Rabi-Ribi is a really good game that gets better the more you play it. The story is the weakest aspect, but when the game is as fun to play and is as well designed as this, the story becomes less important. The game is challenging, and trying to explore the full map and unlock all the abilities will take over 20 hours. The Vita has some excellent Metroidvania games, and Rabi-Ribi is a great addition to the genre on the Vita. So guys, have you picked up Rabi-Ribi? What did you think about it? And what's your favourite Metroidvania game on the Vita? Leave a comment below, and as always, thanks for watching.